Sadly not.
Scotland's on my. I've never been to Scotland. I really want to go.
Same.
I think that's my.
Edinburgh's nice.
Yes. Scotland's pretty cool. I used to study right next to the border of Scotland, and it's pretty cool. But it's a bit sort of desolate if you like live near there. You know, you do sort of like miss civilization. And Edinburgh is very beautiful as a city, but it's also very tiny and strange.
That sounds like something English people would say about Scotland.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That sounds like something English people would say about Scotland.
Yeah. Well, don't get me started on the Scots. You know, that's a whole other thing. That's another whole thing.
Nice. By the way, I invited some other folks from, we just had a previous call about ProMateo before this one. So that's a project that we're working with on the Linux Foundation going forward. So get some folks that are going to listen on, see how we do things here, and see if we can repeat it for when that project.
That's great. Is that Alejandro?
Welcome.
Alejandro is one of our interns. So he's here. I saw Marco. Yeah, Marco's here. He's from the ProMateo team. And then we may have Tay join us.
Hello.
And
hey,
then
Marco. Hey, Alejandro.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Yeah. And then there was another fellow from the open source community that was looking at some hardware. So I thought he's got some great feedback that he's working for ProMateo that might just be interesting to see if there's any cross-pollination.
Amazing. Bienvenidos.
Muchas gracias.
Great. Is there anyone else we're waiting for? I'm trying to think.
No, I don't think so. But is any?
Hey, so I wanted. Also, if we were looking for agenda topics before we jump straight to the mobile app, I thought we would do a quick synopsis and review of if everyone didn't see all the announcements last week. So, Andy, do you want to? I mean, you were on, and Daniel, you were together doing a couple of different. I think you were on a panel discussion and a couple of different conversations with the Clinton Action Committee.
Yeah, so this is an everyday thing for Daniel. I was actually a little bit nervous, you know. I don't know why, but like the word Clinton's, you know, like just it does puts you on edge slightly. So I had to, you know, I'm a big fan, obviously, but I had to, I was just aware that, you know, there was sort of high quality speeches expected from that panel, but it was good, right, Daniel? You're on mute, I believe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, sorry. There we go. All right. It's a good thing I was on video there. There's definitely some people that I think have been consistently part of that organization that help carry some continuity through it. But no, it was great. We had some really good folks. You can check out the recordings. I think Andy has the front keynote thing was like an hour long, and there's a 2-minute segment specifically around Griot. I don't think he mentioned OpenEEW specifically. We were a little upset he didn't because it was in his transcript.
Yeah.
But he did mention the project, and I was really thrilled because he captured really, I think, the impact we wanted to make with it. And so you're free to kind of share that and look into it, and I think it's great. It was an excellent starting point for what this open source community wants to do in its next phase. So I think it was quite great.
Yeah, it definitely brought a lot of attention to the work that we've done. And since then, the guys in Puerto Rico have really accelerated. So one of the things I did was I shared in the docs channel a sort of work in progress sensor installation guide. And actually, there's a lot more information there, but it's not all public. Some of it's sensitive. But so for anyone here who wants access, please send me your email in the chat and I'll give you access. And people, they got really excited about all this news and Clinton, because Clinton has a lot of sway in the Caribbean. I think he had his honeymoon in Haiti, you know, a million years ago. And I think that they you know, there's a connection there with his foundation. So anyway, through all of that, Victor, the head of the Seismic Agency, and other people are now really starting to take seriously this idea that low-cost sensors, like the ones we've developed, are useful for this type of application. There is some pushback in the seismological community as to this, because traditionally they spend tens of millions of taxpayers' dollars. And so, you know, we really are, I think, you know, correct me, Václav, if I'm wrong on any of this, but I think we really are pushing forward a new idea as to how you can create very dense networks for very little money. That not every node has to be a research grade instrument, you know, for data collection. Nodes can just be developed for application purposes like ours.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, yesterday I had a talk for Shake Alert, and those people are really interested in densifying the network of Shake Alert with low-cost instruments. So that might be also like something that our sensors may be useful for.
Yeah, I think no one understands open source in seismology. Open source doesn't seem to be very well recognized. There are a few like Python libraries that everyone uses, but typically there's not a huge amount of sharing that goes on. So I think instantly, we had some attention. We had the Nevada Seisma Lab and some other people who wrote us an email the other day saying, that this is all very interesting. So anyway, I just wanted to say that I think we've, as a community, have generated a lot of interest in what we're doing. So it's all quite exciting.
I think you're right. I think the biggest piece is you're joining the people like us who are technical and on the ground doing so many of these things together with the broader group of people who could use this or improve it or provide expert feedback to it or open the doors for testing it in different locations. So I think that even though it may not reflect in people joining Slack, people doing pull requests, I think you hit on the head there, Andy. There's a lot of activity that goes on beyond that I think is important for any open source project.
Yeah. It's always a bit of a shame that we don't know everything that's going on with our technology. I always sort of feel I'm missing out here. There must be some good stories that people are keeping from us. But yeah. Yeah,
and you know what? You have to realize that there is going to be a natural lag as you first. There's awareness, right? People have to be aware that OpenEEW exists. And then they have to join the Slack channel and sort of smell the community and figure out if we're acceptable or not. And they might look at maybe never join a call, but they look at our code and understand what the project's about. And then eventually, weeks like whatever time later, then you see a patch, right? Or a conversation starts. Hey, they're thinking about deploying in, pick a geography, Greece or Chile or somewhere. And so I'm not worried that suddenly, 50 people then show up, on Thursday last. So I'm not worried about that. I'm very excited that first there was awareness, and now we have to turn that, especially, tactically turn that into success in Puerto Rico, and then worry about the rest later.
And I want to give a big shout out to Ryan, who I think really sort of like turned around our public face towards the end of last week. So thanks, Ryan. I think we were a sort of shabby open source website, and then you sort of elevated us somehow.
Yeah, but Ryan had some awesome help too.
Yeah, definitely.
That was great.
Yeah, I was just turning the design from the original design was Kristen, and Kush worked a lot on it, and then sort of deployed it. So we all had a part in it, but
yeah, and Kush showed up and jumped right in and started banging out good parts of it. That was great.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of, just a simple sort of static website has a lot of power for conveying a message.
Looks great.
And also, just one more note. I think I was showing the dashboard, and I think everybody loved it.
Oh, okay.
So who was your audience, Václav, in this meeting? Can you tell us?
So it was various people from Shake Alert that are, I didn't really know that many of them. It was about 50 people from different universities and institutions. There were people from USGS. There were people from universities that are part of it. So it's Berkeley, MIT, Stanford. There was somebody from Canada because they also might be part of it in the future. I don't know what the status is right now. Somebody from Washington, from Seattle. So yeah, different people, various people, but all of them are kind of scientists or scientifically involved in Shake Alert. So yeah, many faces that I didn't know before.
And you talked them through the sensors, the dashboard, and how everything comes together?
Yeah, so I had like 3 chapters of the talk. So first I talked about the sensor and about the data from Mexico. So because the data from Mexico tell us a lot about the performance of the sensor, how small earthquakes it can record, how well it records strong motion for earthquakes, and all these lectures that we have learned from the deployment in Mexico. Then I talked about a system. So I talked about how how in the center there is an MQTT that all the services subscribe to and publish to, and how these things work together. I talked about the dashboard that we use for displaying the data and operating or interacting with the sensors. I talked about the seismology a bit, and these things. And then the last chapter, I talked about the planned networks, and with the emphasis on my project in Nepal. So yeah.
I mean, if any of those people got excited, which I would have thought some of them would, then there's a real potential for for folks to contribute one day, or for some momentum to start on getting academic people involved.
I would truly hope so, because there were even voices like that where there was a guy who was saying, "Oh, why do we even have this high quality seismometers here? We don't really need that." Like I would disagree with it, because like we need high quality seismometers, and there is a limit to what densification of a network can do. Like, infinite densification doesn't really make sense either, because you just reach the limit of the sensor performance with the noise of the sensor. So, but there's a reasonable trade-off between high quality sensors and low quality.
But for early warnings, we're okay with not having high quality sensors.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm talking a little bit like a seismologist here. Like I like high quality data too. And I think it's good that they have high quality data also, but I think for earthquake early warning, they would definitely benefit from densification of a network, because at the beginning of the meeting, they were showing some like monthly update on the shake alert system, and they were showing like how, they pretty much alerted, like they published an alert about a magnitude 6 earthquake that turned out to be magnitude 3.5 earthquake, and it was just because they didn't really have that many stations, and in that area where it happened, they really mislocated the earthquake, and there were like almost no seismic stations. So I think like in this case, they would definitely benefit from having higher density of local sensors, and I think that might be a way to go for them in the future.
Right. Just in case anyone wants to know, I've sort of been logging different press releases in Notion. So if anybody wants, I've added a link there, and we can see.
Cool. You should drop. We have a channel called News.
Yeah, but the problem is that old news isn't there anymore. Like news doesn't, like our Slack. This is what I hate about Slack, is that things don't last there anymore. So most of the stuff we put there has gone.
Yeah, we'll also probably link to that page from OpenEEW.com, right? We probably should have a news page on there, but all it can be is just a link to this. Is this sort of the official recent press page for OpenEEW?
Well, it's a bit of a mix, because I've got some really old stuff there about Grillo, like 2015. There's some old stuff there as well, but almost all of it is OpenEEW stuff, which was last year. When we started this project.
Yeah.
And then before then was some other stuff.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the ways we want to extend OpenEEW.com is it can be a little pain to keep the stuff up to date, but if we have some like really good, 3 premier pieces and then, click more and you get a full list that's on a static page, that could be helpful.
Yeah. Because I like the way Project Owl have some real, so they have like quotes that are taken out of some of these articles. It's really nicely done on their website. I'm more than happy to update the links if someone can put it on the website in some nice way. I can maintain that.
Yeah, we just need to sort of, if we want to fit into the design, we just need a way to just page out that kind of fits with the carbon theme, but that shouldn't be too hard.
Okay. So I believe Johnny was waiting to tell us about React Native, unless anybody wanted to carry on from that.
Yeah, I've already prepared some of the stuff on my computer. I'm just waiting for the app to boot up.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Well, while you want to give it 2 more minutes, and then I can give 2 minutes about what Neil was discovering the other day.
Oh, I think it's working, but go ahead.
Oh, all right. No, go. I was trying to fill time.
Oh, it's just loading the JavaScript bundle, but that should be done in like a couple seconds. I'll start sharing my screen in the meantime. There's a couple questions I wanted to go over. Which screen is it? This one. I hope it's gonna work. Do you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so it's loading JavaScript the module and it's done. So a couple notes to make. I may or may not have done an oopsie in the way that I make the app without checking if there was an existing Carbon library for React. So I just kind of made my own. I should have done that beforehand, but after the fact, I checked and I didn't really find an immediate Carbon library for React Native. So there might not be one. Even if there is, the advantages of not using React, like the Carbon package, is that we don't need every part of it, and maybe importing it increases the boot up time and the package size for no good reason, because this works fine in my opinion. But maybe others have different opinions. So yeah, let's go and fill stuff in if it would work. Okay. So you give in a name, John Doe. Hello at OpenEEW. You click on next. Actually, first I'm going to show something else. I'm just going to leave one field not filled in. So if you click next, it'll give you like error. Please fill in all required fields. We can change the wording on this. It wasn't part of the design, but I feel like we can either blur out the button.
That would be a nice addition, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. So we could either blur out the button and make it make it gray when you don't have everything filled in, or we can do it like this. So let's enter John back in again, and then you click on next, and then we go here.
But can I just comment there that on that previous screen, if there's any chance of putting in something there about have your GPS on, it would be really useful, because it's a requirement before you step to the next screen that the GPS be, that the location services at least, please have your location services on.
So
I think
you mean like
there is a panel that's, I thought, is Pedro still here? Pedro had done a really nice mock-up, or someone did a nice mock-up of that, and we definitely want to get that set of, like, it was like steps that you were going to do, like, and it was going to ask you to enable your location services for both iOS and Android.
That's right. I remember that. So before this screen, because I think before you start putting in your details, there needs to be those like 3 or whatever panels before that sort of walk you through what you're going to do, and give you a little bit of an overview. So like an introduction. You are about to connect your sensor to the Wi-Fi network and blah blah blah.
But I think that's still good to have it on that screen, Johnny, just the way that you had it. Personally, that's my opinion. Just a reminder, please make it, because I've gone down that every time and I haven't. So having that on there, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I think it would be connection.
So let's get Kristen, because Kristen and I negotiated the words there.
Sure.
Because it's not GPS. Like where's the GPS on your phone? I don't see one. There's no button.
Location services. It's location services, I think.
So that's, we have to get the words right with Kristen.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Pedro's got it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
That's the panel.
Oh yeah, there you
get
go.
those icons, that would be perfect. Or is it that on the repository already?
No.
The icons are in Carbon, but that I don't know if this is just a mock-up.
So does anyone know, if I don't use a Carbon library, am I allowed to take the Carbon icons and use them outside of the library, licensing wise?
Oh yeah. Totally. I think it's all open source. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because
Pedro found it. That's awesome.
Okay. So you have the screen right here. So you enter John Doe and your email address. And you click on next, and then you come here. And what happens here is you have your name here. So enable internet on your sensor will use the Wi-Fi network that your phone is connected to. Yeah, all that stuff. This button is disabled for now, because that was what the design said. And then you enter your password, and it enables itself. So as you can see. Enter your password. Sorry.
Okay, before we do that, so I think that the text is a bit confusing. Instead, enable internet on your sensor sounds almost like an instruction.
Let me open up the file so I can change it live.
Yeah. Instead of enable internet, I would just be connect.
Kristen,
connect your
I didn't
sensor.
like the words here either.
Yeah. I mean, we can fuss about this all day, but I do think enable is confusing.
So what would you want instead? Do you
Just
have anything?
connect your
Yeah,
sensor to Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Connect your Wi-Fi.
I lost the battle with Kristen, and I was following the designer.
Yeah, I was following the designer here as well. Like I just copied the word like the wording word per word. So yeah, now it says this.
Okay, much better.
Cool.
And if
So-
the network doesn't have a password on it,
Well,
Doesn't
so
have all that,
this, Neil, so I'm interested to know, because at some point, I'm assuming, Johnny, you haven't integrated the smart config library yet, or at all. And so at some point when we do, I'm interested to know whether it will give us a pop-up, which is what happens on the Android and iOS smart config stuff, that it actually pops up to say you haven't got a network here, and it gives you an error message. Now, we don't have that in the Flutter app, but that's what I have on the Android version and the iOS.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I'm not quite sure what you mean.
So to date, we've tried using the smart config protocol on our Flutter app, but I've used it before in the sort of native Android and the native iOS app, which is actually given to us by the manufacturer of smart config chips. The point I'm trying to make is that in the native app, which is actually made by Espressive, when you don't have your phone connected to a Wi-Fi network, just where it says in your screen, where it says My Wi-Fi Network, it will give you in red an error that says network not connected or whatever. And more than that, if you connect your phone to the wrong type of network, because if you connect it to a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, it will then say you are connected to a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi or something. The point is that it helps you. And in the Flutter smart config library, I don't think that, or either we've removed it or it was never there in the first place, these sort of error messages.
Never there. Yeah.
Right.
Now I hope there's a React Native library for smart config.
There is. I'm just hoping that it gives you this added sort of information.
Well, what we can always do, and I think this is an option in here, is that we can always we can specify for native. We can specify for platforms. I'm not sure you can do that in Flutter, but you can say like if it's Android, do this. If it's iOS, do this. Right? We can do that. If it's just platform specific stuff, we can always do that.
Right.
Is this? Is there any other comment on the screen?
I'm making this point because it's the number one place people seem to have gone wrong in my experience.
Yeah,
which is,
for sure.
Which is that they don't know if their phone is connected to a Wi-Fi network, and if they are, they're not sure if they might be connected to a 5 gigahertz network, and people just do not know how to get out of that loop of. Yeah. So finding a way to have an error message would really solve that.
Yeah. So is there any other comment on the screen?
One quick question. For the sensor, can it be connected via Ethernet at all? Or is it just Wi-Fi based on your phone?
So on the initial provisioning, there's two purposes of the app. Is one to pass the Wi-Fi credential details, the SSID and the password from the mobile app to the sensor itself,
Okay.
because it doesn't, it's just an ESP32. And then the second purpose of the mobile app is to register the location, the who and the where. So the registration on the prior panel, which was John Doe and then the email address. And then once you press submit here, go ahead, Johnny, it would, well, so something happens in the background because it'll spend like 3 to 5 to 10 minutes trying using smart config to broadcast the details. And eventually you get to the summary panel where you get the GPS coordinates from the mobile phone, because the ESP32 and the sensor itself has no GPS and doesn't see the cloud or doesn't see the sky. So it gets the GPS from your phone. And so that's the little summary, the where and the who.
Right.
And then you register. And then once you register the device, at that point, you can go and plug it in, or actually it can be plugged in while you do it. But the first time you have to
The
use
initial
the mobile
connection
app.
has to be going. Okay.
But you can have
and
it
then-
plugged in. You can have it plugged in before you do the provisioning, right? You can provision it while it's plugged in.
Yeah. Yes.
To grab the location, you would do that, right? Yeah. Because I was just wondering, because if people would know there's an Ethernet on it, they just might initially connect it, and then they might just not worry about the Wi-Fi issue or wondering what's going on. Because like having a lot of family in Mexico, I know sometimes they don't have Wi-Fi, but they do have Ethernet. So like,
Yeah.
So
So that's,
so
I mean,
I would-
that's
I
the
would
tricky
say-
part of it.
I would
the
say that-
instructions say you have to use Wi-Fi the first time.
Yeah, and I think you're right, absolutely right, Alejandro. I think in the first slide, the very first one, it needs to be very clear. You can use Ethernet, but during this process, Wi-Fi is necessary. You know, you
Yeah.
can choose to use Ethernet after this provisioning process, but initially you must use Wi-Fi. And actually, I've got a help page which I put on the docs site, which I need to turn into the wiki. And there, what I say to people is, you know, if you don't have Wi-Fi, then you can even create a hotspot, and I give a link as to how you do that on either side type of phone. You can create a hotspot just to provision your device. Once that's done, you must use Ethernet. But you're absolutely right. People need to know that there are two options.
okay.
In,
Right.
sorry, go ahead. In theory, is it possible to get location from IP address?
My first
No.
iteration had that. It was so inaccurate.
No.
It
Because they
was
just
like,
have like a general area, right? Not actual like pinpoint location.
It gets worse. We did that in Mexico at the very beginning, and it was horrible because what would happen is, yeah, you can be out by hundreds of miles, but even worse, people can be using VPNs, and then you're out by thousands of miles. And we had situations where, you know, where basically completely messed up our calculations. And there's no way you will know. There's no way. So you just need to avoid IP addresses 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, this is all, and I'm just repeating it, all fake data, all dummy data. This is not at all hooked up to any library for Wi-Fi stuff or anything like that. And just like, this is basically like the design Kristen made, but as an app.
cool.
Right.
So Johnny, this is great. Now there's two next steps. So the next step, there's two different RESTful interfaces. The first screen sends a request, you know, John Doe email address to the cloud, and that creates the initial part of your account. And then there's this panel where you add the sensor to the network, and it does two. In this second button here, is it passes that sensor ID. And that becomes really important because that's how we match up the record, because the board starts to wake up and send data to the cloud, and it knows its sensor ID. And actually you get the sensor ID from smart config. So that's how in the cloud we write all the data to a cloud, well, at least the registration and account data to a cloud database. And so that's sort of the second RESTful interface. So I think we should do that. And then we need to go experiment with the smart config library, because that's where this Flutter app really fell down. You know, that I think that our friend from the New Zealand James, who built the Flutter app, the UI is beautiful, right? With iterations from Kristen, but the actual library was sort of just not particularly good. The smart config library.
Yeah, this looks great. I mean, so so all those endpoints though are all on the Node-RED dashboard, right? I mean, a Node-RED backend, right, John? So there's only so it really shouldn't be that hard to connect this to make this functional, right? Now that, I mean, I think the hard part with the app is really doing the front end stuff, right? That's really what we had trouble with Flutter. It's just sort of getting the smart config to work and then hitting those points on the Node-RED backend.
Yeah. I provide I'll provide the details to Johnny.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think it looks very nice there, John. I just wanted to say you've got everything lined up perfectly, which was always an issue with the other one. It looks very nice.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the advantages, of course, are that you can basically use CSS with React Native, which means that any React developer will know how to work with it.
Yeah,
whereas with Flutter, you have to learn a whole new set of skills.
And that's really because I think I'm, you know, at some point I'm going to revise the onboarding process from the dashboard, and that probably is going to cause some changes to this app, and just makes me feel a lot better that I know how to develop in React Native and can try things out myself instead of having to do it in Flutter, which I was in the process of trying to figure out how it all works.
Yeah,
Did you work out which repo to use for this?
I did not. I feel like personally it would be a better idea if you have a separate repository altogether.
Yeah, that's what I proposed too.
Yeah, because if we have a separate branch, it's going to be a mess. It's my experience with it. It's always a mess when you have two different sets of code on different branches.
I think we should rename the one that was there now to be like OpenEEW Provisioner Flutter, and then a new one, OpenEEW Provisioner React.
Yeah. So yeah, once you have the screen, so you have all the information here, and then you click add sensor, and then you basically see this. One thing I'd like to say though is there's a slight difference in this design from Kristen's design. In Kristen's design, this next steps was bold and this was smaller, but I was kind of like, I have this React component for this exact thing, and if I want to keep it consistent and not make another component for one occurrence, I can do it like this.
That's fine. That looks good.
It looks good. It looks good to me.
Yeah, because like as you can see in the summary as well, it was like fields as well. This is the exact same React component. So that's why it looks different, the same as the other things. Because if I have to make a new one with the same stuff, it's a bit stupid. But I can do it if it's necessary. This button doesn't do anything yet, but this one does. I don't think on this iPhone it does, because it's not really an iPhone. It's an emulation, but first party from Apple. So no.
But remind me something. In the old app, once you had provisioned it, doesn't it automatically take you to the dashboard? No.
No, it takes you to this summary, and then that's a custom button. The button is going to take you to the link that Ryan sent the app ID generates, and he passes back to he passes to Node-RED passes to the proxy back to the provisioning app. And so that becomes a custom link to complete the user's registration. They set their password.
So yeah, apparently, I'm not sure if it happens on everything, but apparently the dashboard, at least on this simulation, constantly reloads and causes Safari to realize that there's something off.
Huh.
Strange.
So if you look at what happens if I reload it here.
Ooh, it was there for a second.
Is that only in the? I haven't seen that on because I've gone to my phone on the dashboard and it doesn't seem to.
I have my iPad right there. Give me 1 second.
That works.
And let's see if it breaks on the iPad. So that's dashboard.openeew.com/what?
Events.
/ events, yeah. Let's see, right? OpenEEW.com. So that's dashboard.openeew.com / events. Let's see here. That looks fine. Loads fine.
Yeah, it's got to be. It's probably the emulation problem.
Yeah. But yeah. So that works mostly. One thing though, I don't really know how to change the splash. It's fairly easy. I mean, the splash changing it in the form of Expo, because I'm using Expo, not that hard. Well, have a good one, Marco. Almost said macro there. They did a bit too much assembly. But yeah. So that's that. I also added a little bit of code that makes it so if you have the notch right there, if you don't account for it, it looks awful. If being honest, because the OpenEEW will be a part of the notch, and it'll be hidden by the notch. It doesn't look that good. So I added a piece of code that detects if you have a notch. If you do, cross-platform by the way. If you do, it'll it makes some space for it on the top. Well, I'm not taking full credit because it's a library that I'm using for it, but it works. And yeah, So code-wise, I'm just gonna shut down the simulator.
So I got one quick question.
Mhm.
Regarding downloading the app and running it, how outdated can a phone be? Like, does it have to be, like, can an iPhone like 5 or 6 run this? Is what I'm saying.
Here's the thing. What kind of computer do you have? Do you have a Mac or do you have a PC?
Well, my work laptop's Mac, but I mean, I have a PC personally.
You don't actually have to have a phone in order to run this, unless you actually want to provision anything. Because like I just did, I just run an emulation. You can do it with Android too, or with iOS. You have to have a Mac because it's first party Apple. So to go figure. But if you want to run it on an Android, you have to. You don't actually have to do anything. You have to just download the emulator and just run it. With Expo, it's fairly easy. It'll detect that you have an emulator running, or even have it installed, and it'll just boot it up for you. If you don't want to run an emulator, or your computer can't handle it, if you have an Android phone, for example, you can just hook it up. Now, if you want to run this on an iPhone or an app on or an iPad, you cannot unless you use a Mac. So,
no, I don't mean the code. I mean, like, let's say if you actually deploy the application and people in Mexico are downloading the app, like, how old can their phone be? Because I mean, not everyone's gonna have like an iPhone 12.
I'm gonna be honest. I have no clue because I'm a React developer.
I think React Native. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's you're not using anything special in React Native, right? So like, it should go pretty far back.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't have a lot of time to check it all out. Like a couple following weeks, I just had a little bit of free time, so I decided to spend it on OpenEEW here.
I mean, it was just a curiosity question. I was just wondering because I know not everyone's going to have the iPhone 12 Max Pro or nothing. So,
yeah. So I think that's a really great question. And I mean, it's sort of some of the things I'm dealing with that should be somehow put out there and keep track of, so what level of questions come up from people when they're trying things, so that it's really heuristic. You find out what people can do.
Yeah, and it definitely, it definitely could inform how because we find that it doesn't. I mean, we want this to be able to be installed on phones going back pretty old. I mean, I don't even update my phone that often, right? So, it's something that is definitely an important thing to get as many people to be able to onboard as possible. So there might be, I don't know, there might be the equivalent of polyfills or something in the React Native world to be able to handle older technology, which is definitely something that to look into.
Would you mind if I discuss a little bit of the code right now, or is there too little time for that?
Sure. I think there's so much back end to this that we still need to work on.
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, while you guys were chatting a second ago, I was just looking through Espressif to see the status of the different smart config libraries. Because what worries me is that as the OSs update, Espressif is constantly catching up by releasing new things. This is their GitHub, and so anything which is like the Flutter and the React Native libraries for smart config are community sort of created versions, which have been derived from these native versions. And so, ESP Touch for Android is basically the smart config one that they created for Android, just the one which I used in the past. ESP Touch for iOS I've also used. And both of these have had like updates in the last few weeks. So I'm just a bit nervous. I guess at some point we need to test. Before we go too far with React Native, we really need to test to make sure that we can get it to work on React Native.
If this doesn't work out, no big deal. I spent like a day on this.
Well, the next thing is to, Johnny, I don't know what you said you're busy with school these days. So, the next thing we could try working on is getting the smart config hooked up and seeing if this is, if this development is going to be useful. But I really would like it to be, because I think it would solve a lot of problems if we could have this app in React Native.
Just as a proof of concept, I wonder if there is anywhere on GitHub someone who's created a sort of an example app, so we don't have to bother with integrating it even. We just load it up and see if it works straight out of the box. And then if it does, we can then integrate it with the nice UI.
Now, one thing that would not be ideal at all, but it is a possibility, is if we can't find our own library. If you can't find a good library, we can maybe make our own.
Oh no! It's a complicated. There's a library for smart config.
Okay, so it's
Well,
a
what is
complicated
It's
protocol or
a
something.
non-trivial thing. Basically, what it does is it puts, because the app doesn't know. It basically does a hash, and it puts the details as part of the packet headers, which are public. It's like this craziest thing that TI thought up to whatever 10 years ago. It's not something we want to go reproduce.
It's really nice the way it works at the moment. Having used a whole bunch of them, I was just very impressed with the way that when it works with the location on, it just worked. That was impressive.
If you look at the update log I just posted, like they constantly have this. Would be, if we tried to port it ourselves, we would be constantly trying to catch up with what Espressif are doing, and it's just a real mess because iOS keeps changing. That's just the iOS one. Android also has to keep updating its stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So code-wise, there's a couple things. I could have implemented all the colors here, but we're only using a set of them. And I feel like putting all the colors in there, there's a lot of them, so I didn't add all of them yet. Is it okay if we just have the colors here when we need them, and we don't have them when we don't?
Yes. Yeah, I would say the simplest way to the simplest way. I mean, it's the UI. It's it doesn't have a lot of variation in it, right? It's the so the simplest way to display things, I would say, is the best way to go, and I think that's great what you have there, because if we ever want to change one of the colors, we just go into that file.
I do the same for font sizes. We have medium and we have large, and those are the only two I think I use. I might have accidentally used the set of pixels somewhere. I hope I didn't, but I might have. Perhaps, for example, in the small texts. Yep, there it is. Just gotta fix that. And actually, not right now. There's a meeting going on. Anyway, I'm just gonna add a to-do here. There we go. So yeah, code-wise, it's not really that difficult. It's a really simple app. You can change a bunch of stuff here. For example, the favicon. You can also run it as a website. By the way, this application. I think that's fairly cool. I haven't tried it yet, but you should be able to do it. You can change the adaptive icon, whatever that is. Are we planning to support tablets?
Yeah,
for iOS?
yeah, definitely,
okay.
yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you can change the splash here and whether it's private, but that's not in here. That's in the package.json. For as far as this goes, this is like I have a bunch of wrappers for everything. But really, it's not really that much complicated more complicated than that. It's really a simple app.
That's amazing. Very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Let's get it up on the repo, and we can start trying to figure out if smart config works on it.
Yeah. So
so
fairly
this can
simple, all of it. So
it can be released privately for testing.
Do you mean the code, or do you mean the actual app?
The app.
I think I can probably get you a anyone that has hands on the code can generate an app for it. But I'm pretty sure we have like a thing on Google Play, right?
Yeah. We can start just with an APK and then move to Google Play when we're further down the line.
Yeah, exactly. We can do anything. So yeah, the code-wise, this project is extremely simple. It only took me like half a day to make. So if this gets thrown out, it's not really like a big of a deal.
Well, let's try. It makes so much sense if we can make this work, because I would love this to work, because it's React and you've already done the work. So let's try and make it work. I'm just nervous about keeping up to date with Espressif with the iOS stuff and the Android.
Yeah. Yeah, it all works.
That's by far the hardest part.
Yeah, I just hope that'll work. I hope it does.
If it doesn't work, I'm just going to put it out there that you're looking at the world's worst mobile app developer, but I somehow managed to create both an iOS and Android version of the latest Espressif stuff. and if all we're doing is adding some UI to the front of it, it might not be the worst. It might not be that would be our fallback option. I'm saying
Take their code and just build a new UI in front of it.
Yeah, just put a couple like Android Studio. I figured it out after watching a couple of YouTube videos, and Xcode was actually much easier. So and they make it easy for you in the repos that they give you. But yeah, ideally would be using a more friendly React code base.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the most amazing things, right, is the fact that if you look at the style here, it's basically a CSS with some limitations. You can't quite do everything CSS can do, but you'll quickly realize what's going on, and you will say like, "Oh, hey, this is what's happening, and this was like what I can't do. Is this what I can do?" Did I just say can do twice, or did I say can do and can't do? I don't even remember. It doesn't matter. But yeah, the CSS, it's basically CSS. It's quite amazing. But that's it for the code. And for the app, really. Just let me know where I can upload it, and I'll do that.
Yeah.
Do you want me to make a repo for you?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Johnny. That's great. Shall we talk before we run out of time about the Ethernet issue that Neil raised?
Yeah, sure. Is Neil still here? Oh,
Yeah,
so Neil.
yeah.
So go ahead, Neil. You can summarize. I'll tell you what.
I guess hope I'm not adding too much pain to this, but it was trying it out from just what I had available, which is a bunch of routers, and really looking at how do you set up a test configuration. And the routers I've got, the older, the ones that came out of my test box, so to speak, were 10 and 100 megabit routers, and they've been working fine with Raspberry Pi. When I plugged them in for the first time on this, got a bunch of problems. Plugged it in onto 2 different gigabyte routers that I have, one in my office and one in my test workshop. They worked on that. So it's looking like, so that was my work. And then John did some more investigation.
Yeah, so he found an interesting deficiency. I'm not sure where in the Ethernet libraries for ESP32 was, but so a couple of years ago, I threw away or disconnected all of my 10-100 routers and switches and replaced everything in my house with gigabit Ethernet when I had higher speeds. So I found 3 different models of 10-100 Ethernet switches, and so this one is pretty old, probably 20-something years old. It's a D-Link DSS5 Plus, and so this one has problems, so I was able to reproduce Neil's issue. And then I found 2 other 10-100 switches. So this is a Netgear, no problem with this 10-100. And then this one is a D-Link. This is actually a Wi-Fi router, but you can use it as a switch because it has a switch. And so and this one also is 10-100, but I just didn't use Wi-Fi. I just plugged it in as a switch. So success is here. The code works, and it also works with my gigabit Ethernet switches underneath my desk and in the LAN closet behind the door. So when I started to look at what's going on with this one, it detects. So what happens is the code detects that there's a hot plug. So there's hot plug events. So you actually get a hot plug event. Sorry, it doesn't reach. So you get if you assume that you do this, right? So that's a hot plug event. And so you get a connect, and then you get a disconnect. So the code was getting the events, and then the expectation is that after you do a hot plug event, you're supposed to get an IP address. And I just go into a little tight loop saying, wait for the IP address, which is supposed to be like less than a second. But in the case of this thing, you never get an IP address. So you get the connect event on the switch on our board, but it doesn't, for whatever reason, it doesn't have enough. Well, I don't know what's, either it's a hardware problem or a hardware problem. And anyway, so I put some code in, whereas I thought I was just doing a tight loop for less than a second, and I just do a wait. Now I do a wait and a timeout. So if I don't get an Ethernet IP address, an IP address on the Ethernet interface in 10 seconds or less, I just give up, and the firmware moves on to the next.
But I'm confused. I'm confused. If you don't get an IP address, how can it communicate on the network?
Go on.
It doesn't. It
Right.
doesn't.
But
This
why would it not get an IP address? I don't understand.
Is it like DHCP or something, like an old DHCP implementation?
Well,
maybe. I'm not.
But
Yeah.
it's obviously, but there's obviously something in there where it just, that event doesn't happen in the order expected because there's layers of software. But is that, I mean, it detects that there's something being plugged in, so the chip is detecting a physical event, but you never know unless you get through the library what that is. Is it the right? I mean, Ethernet is pretty complicated, the signal. So is then the signal valid, or what happens after that is not clear.
Can I ask Neil? Has anyone else been able to replicate this issue with Neil's problem? So John, were you able to replicate this?
This I have two of these. Two of these are in my.
And you didn't get an
drawer
IP
here.
address, because I mentioned this because I remember the very first sensors that we got back from Mexico, the place here. Had, because as you say, Neil, it's very complicated Ethernet. So it was able to, we had a manufacturing problem when I had to throw away 10 devices or something, because we had the part which was working where it would detect the connect and disconnect function, but it would not get the IP address, which means to say that because of the bad wiring or whatever it was, there was something wrong with the PHI protocol, or whatever it was, the LAN 87210 chip, which handles this communication, was not connecting, was not able to talk to whatever it needs to talk to. So one can happen without the other, and that could sometimes be a hardware problem. But if both of you are having it, and if it only happens when you use a certain router, then it's not a hardware problem, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Well, the question,
Neil's got it. I have two of the identical, happens only here, works. And Neil's got not these, not a D-Link, whatever. He's got other sort of white label router switches. Sorry, they're switches. I'm not sure. So, but they're old, dusty, right?
Well, that's they're. I mean, they're working perfectly in other circumstances, because otherwise I would have chucked them. And but in this case, they are working with other pieces of equipment, but they are not working here. So, Andrea, I'd actually ask you, when you did that testing previously, what were you testing against initially? Were you testing against a gigabit switch, or?
When I did the testing,
yeah,
I just had them connected directly to a router.
Right. So, yes, but what is that router? This is what it comes down to.
Was it these? You're talking about these here. I just pulled it out of my drawer here. Right? The original one?
Yeah. Well, every single device I've tested both, every single device that I've ever had here, and I've had 100 or so pass through here. I've tested both the connect and I wait to see in the serial monitor that it does both connect and disconnect. And
you have one reference system, which you're not doing.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely right. Yep. Sorry. I understand what you're saying. So I have tried it on a different router, but I haven't tried all of them on both routers. So yeah, fair point.
So in a normal sort of hardware verification, there would be some sort of, what is the range of specifications it needs to meet? And there would be a hardware verification plan to be able to go across that. And what we're really doing is a statistical version of that, which is we're pulling out some stuff, and having it work is very good for the first stage because you can test the rest of the stack from there. But then what are these other issues? I don't know. All we can say at the moment is that we've found something. And the question is, I think, how to progress down that route with it.
So that sounds very logical. I wonder though. So Ethernet is a standard, right? So you would have thought that with a good cable, that part should be more or less okay. So is DHCP? Are there different implementations of DHCP? What could we be looking at here?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I thought DHCP was sort of fixed, because you would have thought when they make modems, they have to have them all.
We would have to dig into the ESP32 network libraries to see what's going on, and I didn't do that. I'm not. I don't want to go.
But it might be, Andre, that you might want to see if you can't develop, or for the way the factory is, is there a reference 10 megabit design? Because presumably with the aim of this being, it's the same like with the iPhone, you want it to work on a wide range of equipment. And
just to prove that this even worked, I did plug one of my Raspberry Pi. I just pulled one of the Raspberry Pis and I hardwired it to this, and it did get an IP address. So
it feels like it's to do with
I proved that the Ethernet, the 10100 switch worked, but it doesn't work with our board.
So I wonder whether it's the Ethernet code, because the Ethernet code in the firmware that we borrowed from somewhere, I'm assuming, because the DHCP stuff, because it's all based on the Wi-Fi Arduino library, as far as I know. And if it connects to the same router via Wi-Fi, it's still being recognized. And I just wonder whether there's something going on with the Ethernet.
So whenever you mention Arduino, though, I mean, it's always a best effort.
Right.
And so
it's all built on those libraries.
Yeah, as with everything, I think there's just a characterization process that needs to happen here. And is it the magnetics in there, or is it something else? You hope there's a higher or something in there. But I did a quick search around to see if anybody was complaining or pointing out stuff in the Arduino world, and it didn't show up.
I didn't find anything either.
But at this point, it looks like the gigabit works and probably has a compensation mechanism, and there's probably, I'm guessing here, I'm just saying it compensates.
Yeah. Well, what happens if I haven't committed a patch, but if you plug into one of these boards and you don't get an Ethernet IP address, it just skips that section and assumes that hopefully you've got Wi-Fi. And if you have Wi-Fi, it just uses Wi-Fi. It's the scenario where you only have a broken Ethernet switch and you don't have Wi-Fi. That's where the board is just going to enter smart config. Hey, I don't know what to do. So if we can document that limitation maybe.
Well, one of the things I'm going to do today is look around Olimex. Olimex, I just put the link in there. Olimex make ESP32 out of Czechoslovakia, I'm not sure where. And we actually copied their Ethernet design when we did our board. So the circuitry, including the LAN controller and whatever else, was exactly lifted from one of these boards. And they seem to have a community and open source. And so it could well be that there's some issue someone's raised in one of their boards to do with this, if that's,
And I have seen some discussion with the Olimex stuff, so I've done that as well.
Okay, yeah, in terms of Ethernet and ESP32, it's a like for like. So what happens on these should happen on ours.
Weird. Yeah, crazy stuff. I love real world hardware.
Well, it's real world. It's whole real world designs and dealing with past as well, the historical side of things. So just that's why people sometimes talk about next generation, which is we just don't want to. We want to ignore everything that happened in the past, but that only works to a point.
Until tomorrow, and then you're obsolete today.
Well, yeah. Well, and then you find out a whole bunch of people from tomorrow are actually working. Our yesterday are like just getting all that equipment, or it's being shipped to them, and
yeah. All right. Well, there you go. I am going to start working on. Well, I have a session tomorrow, and then I'm away on Friday. But then I'm going to start working on the next iteration of the firmware next week, which mostly is going to focus on the new MQ broker. So that's my, well, and I'll help Johnny with the endpoints and the smart config.
Super. Okay. Anything else, folks?
I'm not going to be around for a couple of weeks. I'm going to not be even looking at stuff. So just heads up.
Okay.
I'll just keep my stuff running, and whatever happens with it, we'll see.
Enjoy your time off, Neil.
Enjoy your time off, indeed. If I have pockets of time, I'll try to put it into OpenEEW. But I don't have a sensor, so I can't really do like a lot of the connection stuff. And I feel like even then, there's people probably that have. I mean, I think Ryan, you have a sensor, right?
Yeah, I could help out with the smart config, at least see if that will work or not. And so yeah, if you just, we'll talk over Slack. But if you want to, whatever development you want to do on it, fine. If you want to tell me to do something on it, then just let me know on Slack.
Yeah, I'll upload this as soon as I can. And yeah, I don't have anything else to say.
Yep. And in the next half hour, I'll create that repo for you.
I'll probably have it online by tomorrow then. The end of tomorrow, my tomorrow.
Cool.
Because
Thanks,
after
everyone.
this meeting, I'm gonna have a shower and go to bed.
All right. Great work.
Yeah.
Good to see everybody. Until the
Yep.
next one. By the way, there's
Yeah.
now a calendar invite which I added to the wiki, and so if you guys want to put it in there, you'll never forget.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Unless you
Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Have a
All
good
right.
day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
See ya.